Hey Reddit, I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll begin by saying that everything seemed normal. Well, almost everything. I'm 34, and my wife, Lauren, is 32. We've been married for 7 years. We don't have kids yet, but we've always talked about it. So that's in the plan. We live in a nice neighborhood. Both of us have stable jobs. Me in IT, her in marketing, and we spend weekends doing what a lot of other married couples do. The occasional date night, watching movies, traveling when we can. Nothing extraordinary, but nothing that felt like we were falling apart either. At least that's how it looked on the surface. The first time I started feeling that something was off was about 2 months ago. I'm not one of those guys who always suspects his wife of cheating, but over time, things just didn't add up. She was coming home later from work, acting a little more distracted than usual, and I started noticing she was being more secretive with her phone. She'd always been the type to leave her phone face up on the counter, no big deal, but all of a sudden, she was always locking it, even if she was just walking to the kitchen for a minute. That was weird. At first, I chalked it up to stress at work. She was running a new campaign, and I know marketing can be intense, so I gave her the space to handle it. But then it escalated. Lauren began to distance herself emotionally, too. We were barely having sex anymore. I'd try to initiate, but she'd always find some excuse. I'm so tired, I've got a headache. Or she'd even just turn her back to me in bed, as if I wasn't even there. I tried to push through it, thinking maybe it was just a phase. I told myself, it happens in marriages, and tried not to overthink things. But something else started to nag at me. She started going out more, claiming it was work events or friend gatherings. Fine, I get that she's got a social life, but she used to always tell me about those things. Now, it was like pulling teeth to get any details. The timing didn't match up either. She'd get home at 1 a.m. on a Wednesday, smelling faintly of alcohol, and would be super vague about where she'd been. She'd give me this smile, like I should just accept it, but something in her eyes was different, like she wasn't telling me the whole truth. So, naturally, I started snooping. I know. It's not the healthiest thing to do, but when you feel like something's slipping through your fingers, you do what you have to do. One night, she fell asleep on the couch after a long day at work. Her phone was sitting on the coffee table, face up, like she forgot it. Her password wasn't too hard to guess, but still, I wasn't proud of what I was about to do. I opened the phone, hoping maybe I could just get a glimpse of what was going on. I didn't even have to go far to find something. There was an open text thread between her and a guy named James. The messages were, let's just say, not business-related. And when I say not business-related, I mean they were sexual. The texts weren't subtle either. Things like, can't wait to see you again tonight. I'll wear the red dress you like, and I've been thinking about last weekend when you fucked me in your car. It was hard to focus after that. My stomach dropped. My heart felt like it was going to stop. I swear, I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. I was shaking, nervous, angry, confused. I read back through more of the conversation. It went on for weeks. Texts about where they'd meet up, when she'd sneak out, what they'd do together. There was one part that made me want to throw up, where she said she hadn't had this much fun in ages. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, trying to process everything. My mind was racing. Could this be real? Could I be overreacting? Was this some stupid mistake she'd made? But deep down, I knew. I knew what this was. I wasn't blind. I wasn't stupid. My wife had been having an affair. But what the hell do you do with that kind of discovery? What do you do when you find out your wife, the person you trusted the most, has been lying and sneaking around behind your back? There were so many emotions flying through me. Betrayal, rage, disbelief. But the thing that kept sticking with me was the hurt. She didn't just have an affair. She had been pretending everything was fine at home while doing this. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I had to figure out what I was going to say first. I had to process it, even though I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking maybe I'd misunderstood something. But no, there was no mistaking those messages. There was no way I could just let this slide. The next day, I decided I needed to talk to her. I couldn't just keep pretending like everything was normal, not when I knew the truth. The morning after discovering the texts, I was a mess. I couldn't focus at work. Every time I tried to concentrate on something, my mind kept racing back to those damn messages. I found myself staring blankly at my screen, the weight of what I knew pressing down on me. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. Today was the day I had to confront her. Lauren came home that evening like everything was just normal. She had a smile on her face, probably after a day of pretending like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek and started talking about her day, but I couldn't hear any of it. My mind was miles away. I didn't even look at her. I didn't want to. All I could think about was what I had read on her phone, and the fact that she had lied to me for so long. "Hey, can we talk?" I asked her, my voice sounding calmer than I felt. Lauren raised an eyebrow. "Sure, what's up?" She seemed so relaxed, like she had no clue that her whole world was about to come crashing down. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. I didn't want to yell at her. Not yet. I needed answers. I needed her to own what she'd done. "I know about James," I said, looking at her directly. Her face froze. I saw her blink a couple of times, like she was trying to process what I had just said, but she didn't immediately deny it, which hit me like a ton of bricks. Instead, she let out a long sigh and dropped her shoulders, like she was exhausted by the whole thing. "Look," she began, avoiding my gaze. "I can explain." I felt my chest tighten. "Explain?" I spat, trying to keep my voice steady. "Explain what?" "How you been cheating on me for weeks. How you been lying about where you're going, who you're with, and what you're doing. That kind of explain?" Lauren's eyes darted around nervously, like she was searching for the right words, or maybe just the right excuse. She didn't seem remorseful at all. There was no genuine apology. Instead, she gave me this annoyed look, like I was the one being unreasonable for confronting her. "God, it's not what you think," she said, almost scoffing. "James is just a guy I met at a work event. It's not even like that. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just supposed to be some fun, something to relieve the stress. You don't understand what it's like dealing with everything at work, with you being so distant lately." I could feel my blood boil. "Distant? Distant?" I shouted, the hurt finally breaking through. "You think I've been distant? I've been right here, trying to make this work, trying to get you to talk to me, to connect with me. But you were too busy fucking some guy, behind my back." Her face twisted with annoyance. "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy? You've been completely checked out. We barely have sex anymore, and I'm supposed to just deal with that? You can't even take 5 minutes to look at me without your eyes glazing over." I stood there, stunned. "So this is my fault?" I could barely wrap my head around it. "You decided to cheat on me because I was tired and trying to deal with my own life?" "Yes," she snapped. "Exactly. You haven't been paying attention to me. You're always too busy with your work or your projects, and I felt like I was just here, alone. It was easier to just get some attention elsewhere." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't even taking responsibility for her actions. She was blaming me. And that's when I saw it, the true nature of her character. This wasn't a moment of weakness, a mistake that she regretted. She wasn't crying or apologizing. No, she was angry at me for confronting her, as if I was the one in the wrong. That's when the rage truly kicked in. "You're serious, aren't you?" I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. "You think it's my fault that you went and cheated? You think it's okay for you to lie and betray me, and then turn it around on me like I'm the one who messed up?" She crossed her arms and looked away. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," she muttered, as if it was all just some insignificant thing. "It's not like I love him. It was just sex. It meant nothing." She gave me a dismissive glance, as if that was supposed to make everything okay. I was done. I didn't know what else to say. There was no point in arguing with someone who wasn't going to take responsibility for her actions. I'd always heard that cheaters can be manipulative, but this was a whole new level. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about the marriage. It was all about her needs. The silence between us was suffocating. I could feel the anger building inside of me, but underneath it was something even worse. Hurt. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt before. This wasn't just some mistake. This was a conscious decision she'd made every single time she texted him, every time she sneaked out behind my back. And for what? To feel better about herself? To feel desired? I had no idea who this woman was anymore. "I don't know what you want me to say," she said after a moment, her voice softer now, but still so cold. "I fucked up, okay? But it's not the end of the world." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to hurt her the way she had hurt me. But instead, I just stood there numb. "I want you to admit that you fucked up. I want you to realize that this, I gestured between us, is over. I can't be married to someone who doesn't even respect me enough to tell me the truth. This isn't something I can forgive. Her face hardened. So, that's it? You're just going to walk away? I don't know, I said quietly, swallowing hard. But I can't keep living this lie. I need time to think. And that's when I walked away. I grabbed my things, packed a bag, and left. I didn't even care where I went. I just couldn't stay there. Not with her in that house. Not with that person anymore. I spent the night at a friend's place, just kind of existing. I didn't feel alive, honestly. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I expected. What I felt was numb. The betrayal had hit me so hard that I couldn't process it all at once. It was like a constant ache that wouldn't go away, a heavy weight that settled in my chest and kept me from breathing easily. I didn't reach out to Lauren. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to talk to her right then. My mind kept replaying that night. The coldness in her voice, the way she tried to brush it all off. It hurt more than I thought it would. I used to believe that if something ever happened to us, we'd be able to talk it out, work through it. But what I didn't account for was the possibility that she wouldn't care. I went back home the next day to pick up some more clothes and get my laptop, and I found her sitting on the couch, waiting. She didn't look sad. She didn't look like she regretted anything. She just looked resigned, like she knew exactly what was happening. "Are you still leaving?" she asked, her voice flat. She wasn't crying or pleading. She didn't look particularly concerned. It was like she expected me to leave, and I was just confirming it. "I don't know," I said honestly. I didn't know anything right then. I didn't even know what I was feeling. I don't know how to look at you anymore." Her face tightened at that, but she didn't argue. "Look, I get it," she said, her tone almost sarcastic. "I fucked up, okay? But don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know what this is? This is just a rough patch. You don't have to blow it all up." It was like she was treating the whole thing like it was a bad week at work, something you just brush off and move on from. I couldn't believe it. She had cheated on me, and she was minimizing it. It made me feel like I was the crazy one for feeling hurt. She didn't seem to have any comprehension of what she'd done to me. The worst part was, it wasn't even just the affair. It was the years of lying, of pretending like everything was fine, of making me feel like a fool. "I can't just pretend this didn't happen, Lauren," I said, the anger beginning to resurface. "You've been lying to me. You've been with someone else. I don't even know who you are anymore." Lauren didn't even flinch. "You're making this harder than it is," she said again, exasperated. "This is just sex. It's not like I'm in love with him or anything. It was a mistake, okay? We don't need to turn this into some big drama. We can just move on, fix things, and be normal again." I felt like I was in a nightmare. "You think this is just a mistake?" I asked, shaking my head. "You've been having an affair with him for months, Lauren. And you think we can just sweep this under the rug? Pretend like everything's fine?" She stared at me, unblinking. "Yes," she said. "You're blowing it out of proportion. You can either accept that it happened, or you can leave. But I'm not going to keep doing this with you, okay? I don't want to keep fighting." I stood there, feeling like I was suffocating. I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Here was the woman I married, the one I thought I knew, and she was telling me that I could either accept her betrayal or walk away. There was no remorse. There was no apology. Just a cold indifference that stung like a slap in the face. And that's when I realized something. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't just move on from it. I didn't want to fix it. Not with her. I thought I might stay for the sake of trying to figure out a way forward. But as I stood there, looking at her, the truth hit me like a freight train. If she didn't even feel the weight of what she'd done, if she could dismiss the pain she caused me so easily, then I wasn't the one who had failed this marriage. She was. "I'm leaving," I said, more calmly than I felt. "And I'm not coming back. Not like this." She blinked, her face showing a mix of frustration and what? Indifference? "Fine. Whatever." "I don't care," she muttered, standing up to grab her bag and head out the door, as though she couldn't even be bothered to fight for what we had. It hit me then, this was it. There was no love left on either side. Not in the way we needed it. If she couldn't fight for me, if she couldn't even apologize for what she'd done, then I had nothing left to give her. I didn't know if she was even capable of real remorse. So I packed my things and left. I left that night with more than just clothes and my laptop. I left with the weight of everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattering in an instant. The life we'd built, the years of trust, the memories of us laughing over dinner or taking vacations together. Suddenly, they all felt like lies. It wasn't just that Lauren cheated on me. It was the realization that for months, maybe longer, she had been pretending to care about our marriage. And I had been so blind, so willing to accept the excuses she gave me. But all along, she was already gone. She just didn't care enough to tell me. I stayed at my friend's place for a couple of nights. Chris, one of my best buddies, was cool about everything. He didn't ask many questions, just offered a place to crash and a cold beer when I got there. I didn't want to talk about it right away. I couldn't. I just needed a few days to not think about it, to not see her face or hear her voice. I thought maybe the anger would fade if I gave it enough time, but instead it kept building, gnawing at me. Every little thing I'd seen, the texts, the phone calls, the way she acted like it wasn't a big deal, kept running in my head like a broken record. I couldn't go back to that house. I couldn't go back to pretending like everything was normal. It didn't matter how many times Lauren told me it was just sex, or how she justified her actions by saying it was my fault. I knew deep down that if I stayed, I would keep trying to fix something that was already broken beyond repair. We couldn't just move on from this. Not when she had taken everything that was sacred to me and thrown it away so easily. But leaving wasn't easy. There was still this part of me that didn't want to admit I was walking away from my marriage. I thought about what I had to lose. We had built a life together. I had invested so much of myself into this relationship, and now it felt like it was all slipping through my fingers. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't walking away from a marriage. I was walking away from the idea of a marriage. The truth was, we hadn't had a real relationship for a long time. We were living parallel lives, coexisting, but never truly connecting. The affair wasn't just the nail in the coffin. It was the wake-up call I needed to realize that I had been holding on to something that no longer existed. I started calling around to find a lawyer, but every time I dialed a number, I felt sick. This wasn't how I imagined my life going. I didn't think I'd be in my 30s, sorting through the mess of a broken marriage. It wasn't the plan. I never thought I'd be the one sitting here, feeling betrayed and questioning everything I thought I knew. But it wasn't just about the affair. It was the years of her minimizing my feelings, the years of pretending that everything was fine when I knew deep down it wasn't. The sex had stopped, sure, but the emotional distance had been there long before. The truth was, I had ignored the signs because I wanted to believe in something that wasn't real. And now I was paying the price for it. One afternoon, I met with a lawyer. I didn't go in with a long speech or a list of demands. I just told him that I wanted to file for divorce. No drama. No long back and forth. I just wanted out. The lawyer was nice enough, explaining how the process would work, talking about assets and custody. We didn't have kids, thank God. But I couldn't focus on any of that. My mind kept drifting back to Lauren, to the betrayal that had shattered my life. I wanted to feel some sense of peace about the decision. I wanted to feel like I was doing the right thing. But all I felt was empty. I didn't tell Lauren right away. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react in any way. Instead, I spent the next few days gathering my things, making plans to move into a small apartment. It wasn't the grand change I'd imagined. I didn't feel liberated. I didn't feel like I was taking control of my life. It just felt like something that had to be done. When I finally told her I was filing for divorce, I didn't expect an apology, and I didn't get one. She didn't beg me to stay. She didn't try to convince me that everything could be fixed. She just shrugged and said, "I didn't think you'd go through with it. But whatever. I'm not going to fight you on it." I guess that was the final confirmation for me. If she wasn't even willing to fight for this, then it was definitely over. I didn't look back after that. I moved into the apartment, and the reality of living on my own started to sink in. It was lonely, sure. I missed having someone to come home to share my day with, even if it had been a long time since we actually connected. I missed the idea of being married, but the more time I spent away from her, the more I realized I was doing the right thing. I had to rebuild my life, and I had to do it without her. The first few weeks in the apartment were difficult, to say the least. It was a one-bedroom place, small, simple, and a far cry from the house Lauren and I had shared. I'd expected it to be lonely, but I wasn't prepared for just how isolating it would feel. There were nights when I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened, wondering if I could have done something differently. Could I have saved us? Was there something I missed? But no matter how many times I asked myself those questions, the answer was always the same. No. The marriage was already gone long before the affair. The affair was just the moment I finally saw it. I spent a lot of time reflecting, not just on the betrayal, but on myself, on the kind of person I was when I was with Lauren. I was so focused on being a good husband, on trying to make her happy, that I'd lost sight of my own happiness. I'd allowed myself to get lost in the role of being the guy who always fixes things, even when it wasn't mine to fix anymore. Even when she was the one breaking us apart, bit by bit. But the worst part was, I had trusted her. I had believed in the person she showed me every day, the person who smiled at me and told me she loved me, while secretly betraying me behind my back. It was like I had been living with a stranger for years, and I had no idea how to feel about that. Part of me still wanted to believe that the woman I married was still somewhere inside of her, but the other part, probably the smarter part, knew that she was long gone. I had good days, of course. Days when I felt like I could actually breathe again, like the weight of everything was lifting, but then there would be a moment, usually at night when I was alone in my apartment, that I would feel the sting of loneliness. It was like I couldn't shake the shadow of our life together. I was trying to figure out who I was now, what I wanted moving forward, but it was hard to shake the sense of failure that came with the divorce. It felt like I had let myself down, let her down, and most of all, let the life I had hoped for slip through my fingers. One afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head. I ended up at the park near my new place, the one I used to visit with Lauren all the time. It used to be our spot, the place where we would walk hand in hand, talk about the future, or just sit quietly and enjoy the view. It felt like a punch in the gut to be there alone, but I needed to face it. I needed to remind myself of everything I was walking away from. The idea of a future together. The hope that maybe things would get better. But as I walked around the park, I realized something. I was starting to let go. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I was beginning to understand that I didn't need to be bound to that past. The life we had was gone, and trying to hang on to it would only keep me stuck in the same place. I had to let it go. I had to let her go. It wasn't easy. I'm not going to lie. I still miss the comfort of having someone there, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to share everything with. But that comfort was an illusion. That wasn't love. It was just familiarity. I'd gotten so used to the person I thought she was that I couldn't see the truth. And now that I saw it, I knew I had to move on. Not for her sake. Not for anyone's sake, but my own. After that day at the park, I made a decision. I was going to focus on me for a while. I didn't know what that meant yet, whether it was picking up old hobbies or going out with friends more, or maybe even dating again someday. But the one thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to let this divorce define me. I wasn't going to let the pain of this betrayal control my life. I started seeing a therapist, someone who could help me unpack everything and begin to understand how I'd gotten to this point. It was weird at first, talking to a stranger about my marriage, about Lauren, about everything that had happened, but slowly I started to feel like I was being heard. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone cared about my feelings and wanted to help me get through this. It didn't fix everything, but it helped a lot. And I'll admit, there were moments when I thought about Lauren. I wondered what she was doing, whether she was with James or if she even thought about me at all. But each time those thoughts crept in, I stopped myself. I didn't need to think about her anymore. She had made her choices. She had her life, and I had mine. And I was done with her. Over time, I started to feel lighter. The weight of the betrayal was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating. And slowly but surely, I started to realize something. I was going to be okay. I didn't need to be with someone to be happy. I didn't need to fix anyone. I just needed to fix myself. I needed to learn to trust myself again, to believe that I could build a new life without carrying the baggage of the past. It's funny how life works, isn't it? 1 minute, you're stuck in the middle of a painful mess, questioning everything you've ever believed about love and trust, and the next minute, you start to feel like you're actually getting your footing again. It's not instant. It doesn't happen overnight, but gradually I started to feel like I was pulling myself together. I kept going to therapy, each session peeling back more layers of who I had been and who I wanted to become. At first, it was just about talking through the betrayal, the hurt, and the anger. But over time, it became less about Lauren and more about me. The therapist helped me realize that I had been so focused on saving my marriage, on trying to keep things together, that I had completely lost sight of who I was in the process. I had built my entire life around someone else's happiness, and when that fell apart, I had no idea how to stand on my own. It wasn't just about Lauren's affair. It was about me learning to live for myself again. I started taking better care of myself, physically, mentally, emotionally. I got back into running, something I hadn't done in years. I started cooking again, trying out new recipes and rediscovering my love for food. Little by little, I felt like I was rediscovering pieces of myself I had forgotten existed. I remembered how much I loved playing guitar, something I hadn't touched in years. I started playing again, just for fun, not to impress anyone, but for the pure joy of it. I also spent a lot of time with friends. I think that's when I realized how much I had isolated myself during the marriage. Lauren and I had always been the kind of couple that kept to ourselves, but I hadn't realized how much that had affected my relationships with other people. I started seeing more of Chris, my old buddy, going to bars and watching games together. We started talking about things that had nothing to do with the divorce, things like the stupid things we used to do in college, the stuff we'd been through. It felt good to laugh again, to not feel weighed down by everything. And then there was dating. I didn't really think about it at first, but as the months went by, I found myself noticing women again. I wasn't ready for a relationship, not by a long shot, but I felt this little spark in me that had been dormant for so long. It was weird at first, like I was learning to be myself again, not just in relation to someone else, but as me. One evening, a friend set me up on a blind date. I wasn't sure if I was ready for it, but I decided to give it a shot. Her name was Jenna. We went to a local bar, had a couple of drinks, and just talked. It was easy, surprisingly easy. We talked about our jobs, about our hobbies, and about the ridiculous stuff that goes on in our lives. She wasn't Lauren. She didn't have that same spark that Lauren once had, but that was a good thing. Jenna was just herself, and I was starting to realize that was enough. I didn't need someone to fix me or complete me. I just needed someone to share a laugh with, to connect with, and, for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. We didn't end up having a second date. I don't know why. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was just that we weren't quite a match. But that's okay. It felt like a step forward, like I was finally putting myself out there again, trying to connect with people in a way that wasn't about filling the hole left by someone else. And that's when I had my moment of clarity. I was walking back from that date, alone, of course, and I realized something. I didn't need to rush into anything. I didn't need to prove that I was okay. I was okay. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece. I was becoming the person I was always supposed to be. I didn't need anyone else to validate that. In the months following, I focused on being the best version of myself. I was doing better at work, I was taking care of my mental health, and I was finally starting to feel like I was living again. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, of course. There were days when I missed the comfort of a relationship, days when I thought about Lauren and wondered if she was happy with James. But I didn't need to know anymore. I wasn't interested in being part of her world anymore. I had my own world now, and it was slowly coming together. And it wasn't just about moving on from the marriage. It was about learning to trust myself again, to trust that I was worthy of love and happiness. Not just the kind that comes from being in a relationship, but the kind that comes from being at peace with yourself. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or wondering if I was doing the right thing. I was just living, and that was enough. It's been a few months since everything went down, and as I look back now, I can't help but feel proud of how far I've come. It's not like the pain of the betrayal disappeared overnight. It didn't. But with each passing day, the sting lessens a little more, and I find myself looking forward to the future in a way I haven't in a long time. The more I reflect on what I've gone through, the more I realize how much of myself I'd lost during the marriage. It wasn't just that Lauren had cheated on me. It was the years of neglecting my own needs, of putting someone else's happiness above my own. I had forgotten who I was before her, the things I loved doing, the person I was before I fell into the role of husband. I was so focused on keeping up appearances, on trying to be the perfect partner, that I lost sight of the fact that I was a person in my own right with my own desires, needs, and dreams. The process of rediscovering myself wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt like a stranger in my own life, when I wasn't sure who I was anymore or where I was going. But every time I hit one of those walls, I pushed through. I picked up new hobbies. I spent more time with my friends. I focused on my work and started taking better care of myself. I even started making plans for the future, things I had put on hold for too long because I was too busy trying to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. I've learned that it's okay to not have all the answers right now. It's okay to not know what the next chapter of my life looks like. What matters is that I'm finally living for myself. I'm not waiting for someone to complete me or to make me feel whole. I've learned that I am enough, just as I am. It's a tough lesson, one I'm still learning every day, but it's empowering. And it's something I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't gone through this mess. Looking back at the divorce, I've come to realize that it was a necessary step, even if it was painful. It wasn't about punishing Lauren or trying to get back at her. It was about freeing myself from a relationship that was no longer serving either of us. We were both stuck in a cycle of pretending, and in the end, the only person I could control was me. The only person I could fix was myself. I still have moments when I feel that little twinge of sadness, when I wonder what could have been, but those moments are fewer and further between. I can look back at our time together and acknowledge that there were good parts. There were real moments of happiness, of love. But those moments don't define my life anymore. I'm not the person I was when I was with her. I'm someone else now. Someone stronger, someone who knows that they deserve better than being treated like a backup plan. I've learned how important it is to trust my instincts. When things started to feel off in the marriage, I brushed it off. I ignored the red flags, telling myself everything was fine. But now I understand that my gut was trying to tell me something all along. And if I hadn't ignored it, maybe I could have spared myself a lot of pain. But honestly, I think that's part of the journey. The pain was necessary for growth. It forced me to face parts of myself that I had neglected and to face the truth about my relationship. But more than anything, I've learned that happiness isn't something someone else can give you. It's something you have to create for yourself. I had put my happiness in Lauren's hands, thinking that if she was happy, I would be too. But happiness isn't a shared project. It's an individual pursuit. I've also realized how important it is to set boundaries in a relationship. I was so focused on being the perfect husband that I allowed myself to be mistreated. I ignored the fact that I deserved respect, trust, and love. When Lauren cheated, it wasn't just a betrayal of our vows. It was a betrayal of me as a person. I let her manipulate me, let her make excuses for her behavior, and I allowed myself to be the last person on her priority list. But I won't make that mistake again. In future relationships, I'll know what I'm worth, and I'll never settle for less than I deserve. One thing I've really come to appreciate through all of this is how resilient I am. The betrayal was hard. The divorce was painful, but I came through it. And if I could survive that, I know I can handle whatever life throws at me next. The future might seem uncertain, but it's also full of possibilities. I don't need to rush into anything. I'm learning to enjoy being alone, to be at peace with myself before I bring anyone else into my life. And maybe, someday, I'll meet someone who values me for who I am, not just for what I can give them, but because they see me as their equal, as someone who deserves to be loved. But I'm not in any rush to get there. Right now, I'm just focused on continuing to grow, to become the person I always wanted to be. So, to anyone out there going through something similar, if you're reading this because you feel betrayed, lost, and alone, just know this: you are not defined by someone else's actions. You are not defined by the hurt they caused you. You are defined by how you pick yourself up after the storm, how you learn to trust yourself again, and how you move forward. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And no matter how bad things seem right now, you will heal, you will rebuild, and you will come out stronger on the other side. Take it from me. You are worth more than the way they treated you. Never forget that. One thing I didn't expect when I started moving on from everything was how much my relationships with people, friends, family, even acquaintances, would change. It's not something you really think about when you're in the thick of dealing with a divorce, but the impact of that kind of heartbreak has a ripple effect. The way I see the world, the way I interact with others, has all been altered by the lessons I learned from Lauren's betrayal. I used to be the type of person who would stay in the background, keep my feelings to myself, and try to keep things smooth. I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems, especially when things were tough with Lauren. Looking back, it was an unhealthy habit. I kept so much of myself hidden away in that marriage, trying to be the rock for everyone else while neglecting my own needs. I think that's part of the reason I found myself so devastated after everything fell apart. I had no idea how to lean on others, how to ask for help. But over the past few months, I've become much more open with people, especially with my close friends. Chris has been my biggest support through all of this. He was the one who sat with me when I was at my lowest, letting me vent, sharing a drink, and giving me some of the most brutally honest advice I've ever heard. He told me straight up that I needed to focus on myself and stop trying to fix things that weren't my responsibility anymore. He told me to stop thinking about Lauren, to stop wondering if she was doing okay. She's living her life, man. You got to start living yours. I never really considered how much of myself I had locked away for the sake of my relationship. And in talking to Chris and a few other friends, I realized how much of an impact it had on me. I was so invested in keeping Lauren happy, keeping our marriage intact, that I'd stopped connecting with the people who really cared about me. The ones who had always been there. Once I started opening up and letting people in again, I felt like I was breathing for the first time in years. I was rediscovering the importance of healthy, honest connections. Family, though, that was a bit trickier. My parents, bless them, were supportive, but I could tell they were struggling with how to help. They didn't know how to navigate the situation, and I didn't really know how to explain what had happened either. At first, I just didn't want to talk about it. I was ashamed. I didn't want to share the raw details of the affair, the pain, the heartbreak. But over time, I realized they were just trying to help, trying to be there for me in the way they knew how. After a while, I started being more open with them about how I was doing. I started telling them about the things I was rediscovering about myself, about the progress I was making in therapy, about the things that made me happy again. It wasn't just about what had happened anymore. It was about the healing, the rebuilding, and the future. They started to understand. They began to see that I was okay, that I was no longer drowning in the hurt and the past. And then, something unexpected happened. Some of my friends, people I hadn't been close to in years, reached out to me after hearing about the divorce. It was a bit of a surprise at first, but honestly, it felt good to have people show concern. Some of them had gone through similar situations, and I wasn't the only one who had experienced that kind of pain. Talking to them, hearing their stories, the way they had rebuilt themselves after betrayal, was comforting. It was like this unspoken bond, this shared understanding that made me feel less alone. I also started to notice that I was offering more support to other people. At first, I thought I'd never want to talk about relationships again, especially when I was still processing everything. But one evening, I ran into an old friend, Mark, at a coffee shop. Mark had just gone through a messy breakup. He was a wreck, clearly struggling with everything that had happened, and we ended up talking for hours. I didn't tell him everything about my own situation, but I shared enough of it, and it felt good. I realized that the pain I'd gone through could actually help someone else. I had walked through the worst part of my life, and now I could be the one to offer a little bit of light to others who were stumbling in the dark. It wasn't about giving advice, at least not in the sense of telling people exactly what to do, but more about sharing my story, my journey, and letting others know that they weren't alone. I think that's the thing we forget when we're in the middle of the storm, that there's a world of people out there who have gone through the same thing and come out the other side. It's easy to feel like you're the only one, like your situation is uniquely bad, but the truth is, there's strength in community. The more I talk to people, the more I realize that everyone is fighting battles. The betrayal of a spouse isn't unique. In fact, it happens all the time, and every time it does, someone else has to rebuild themselves. We're all just figuring it out as we go along. That shared humanity, our collective ability to heal, to grow, to learn from our mistakes, was something I began to embrace more than I ever had before. I even started offering advice on relationship forums, sometimes anonymously, sometimes under my real name. I guess in a way, I was paying it forward. I would tell people that it's okay to be angry, that it's okay to feel betrayed, but that those feelings don't have to define you. That moving on doesn't mean you're forgetting the past, but rather, you're learning from it. The most important part of recovery is accepting that the past is gone, but your future is still ahead of you. There are moments when I get a message from someone who's just gone through a breakup or a divorce, and they ask for advice. And I think back to where I was just a few months ago when I was the one looking for answers. I don't have all the answers now, but I've learned some things that I wish someone had told me. I share those things when I can, and I hope it helps someone else feel a little less alone. As much as I've been focusing on healing and getting my life back on track, there's one thing I've learned. The future doesn't come with a manual. It's not something you can predict or control. Life just happens, and you either roll with it or get left behind. After everything I've been through, though, I've come to appreciate that uncertainty isn't necessarily a bad thing. The unknown is where growth happens, where change is born, and where you truly begin to figure out who you are. It's hard to describe the feeling of finally being free. For so long, I was weighed down by guilt, by hurt, by trying to make a relationship work that wasn't meant to. But now, there's this sense of possibility, of space to breathe. The future feels like an open road, and while I don't know exactly where it will take me, I'm excited to walk down it. I've learned a lot about myself in the past year. One of the most important lessons has been about resilience. I didn't think I had it in me, honestly. When I found out about Lauren's affair, I felt like my world had shattered. I was questioning everything about myself, wondering how I had missed the signs, what I had done wrong, and why I hadn't seen it coming. But through all the pain, I learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. It's not always easy, and it doesn't happen overnight, but you can rebuild yourself. You can find the strength you thought you lost. Another lesson I've taken to heart is the importance of boundaries. Before everything fell apart, I was the type of person who always put everyone else's needs ahead of my own. It's like I didn't want to upset anyone, didn't want to rock the boat. But now, I understand that setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to people. It's about saying yes to yourself. It's about respecting your own needs and making sure that others do the same. I'll never let myself get into a relationship where I lose sight of my own worth again. And let's be honest, there's something to be said about not rushing into anything new. After Lauren and I separated, I was tempted to jump back into the dating scene, but I quickly realized that I wasn't ready. I didn't need a new relationship to fix me or distract me from the pain. The last thing I wanted was to use someone else as a band-aid for the hurt that hadn't healed yet. I needed to heal for myself, not for anyone else. So, I decided to take my time to focus on being the best version of myself before I thought about being with anyone else. If the right person comes along, then great. But I'm not chasing anything anymore. I'm learning to enjoy the solitude, to find peace in being alone, and to be content with just being me. And that's the thing. After all the heartache, after all the lies, after all the tears, I've learned how to be okay on my own. I think that's the key to moving forward. Finding peace within yourself first, before you can even think about what's next. I'm no longer trying to fill the void left by Lauren. I'm no longer searching for answers from her, or from anyone else. The answers are inside me now. I'm in charge of my own happiness, and I won't let anyone take that from me again. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I think that's okay. I'm not afraid of the unknown anymore. I don't need everything to be figured out right this second. Life is about experiencing the ups and downs, learning from every setback, and enjoying the little moments of joy that come along the way. I've been through hell and back, and I'm still standing. I know I'll keep moving forward, and I'll keep evolving one step at a time. I've been thinking a lot about what I want in the future. At the moment, it's about personal goals, things that I put off while I was in the marriage. I'm taking a trip I've always wanted to go on, something I'd never been able to do when I was tied down with Lauren's plans. I'm thinking about starting my own business, something I've always dreamed of, but never had the guts to pursue. The possibilities are endless now, and I can do whatever I want. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have control over my own life again. There are still days when I feel the weight of the past. I won't lie. Sometimes I'll catch myself thinking about Lauren, wondering what she's doing, wondering if she's happy with James. But those thoughts don't control me anymore. I don't need to know. I've let go of that. The truth is she was a chapter in my life. A big one, yeah, but not the only one. And it's okay to close that chapter now. It's okay to move on. I don't know what the future holds, and I don't have any grand expectations. But I'm learning to trust the process, to trust myself. I'm learning that happiness comes from within, that it's not something you find in someone else, and that your worth isn't determined by how someone else treats you. It's about what you believe about yourself. And I'm starting to believe that I'm enough. To anyone out there who's reading this because you're going through something similar, all I can say is this: it gets better. It might not feel like it now, but I promise it gets better. You will heal. You will grow. And one day, you'll look back and realize how strong you were, how much you learned, and how far you've come. You don't need anyone to validate your worth. You've got everything you need inside of you. Keep moving forward. You've got this. It's funny how life works. 1 minute, you're walking around with your world turned upside down, and the next minute something shifts. It's not always a big moment or a grand revelation. It's more like a subtle nudge from the universe telling you, you've learned what you needed to learn, and now it's time to let go. I had one of those moments not too long ago. I was at the gym, working out like I usually do these days. Working out has become my escape, my way of staying grounded, of getting out all the stress that's built up over the years. I've found that physical strength is a good metaphor for emotional strength. It's all about pushing through, even when it feels like you can't go any further. But that day, I wasn't thinking about strength or progress or healing. I was just lost in the motions, trying to clear my head when something unexpected happened. I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Samantha, a girl I went to high school with. We had been good friends back then, but life had kind of pulled us in different directions. We talked for a bit, exchanged pleasantries, and she mentioned she'd been following my story since the divorce. She had heard about it through mutual friends, and she asked how I was doing. I told her I was good, that I was moving on, focusing on myself, all the things I'd been saying to everyone else for the past few months. But then she asked me a question that kind of caught me off guard. She asked, "Do you think you're really happy now? Or are you just filling the void left by her?" At first, I wanted to brush it off, to say, "Of course I'm happy. I'm doing great. Everything's fine." But when I stopped and really thought about it, her question stuck with me. It was like a mirror held up to my face, and for the first time in months, I truly reflected on how far I'd come and how much work I still had left to do. I had been so focused on the idea of healing, of moving forward, that I hadn't truly asked myself whether I was genuinely happy or just content with being okay. There's a difference, you know? Being okay is about surviving, about getting by, while being truly happy is about thriving. I had been so wrapped up in the mechanics of moving on, changing my routines, picking up new hobbies, talking to friends, that I hadn't fully processed what it meant to feel joy again, to feel at peace with my life. So, I decided to take a step back. I started looking at my life in a new way. I asked myself some tough questions, questions that I had been avoiding for a long time. Am I doing the things I truly love? Or am I just filling time? Am I surrounding myself with people who genuinely care about me? Or am I holding on to relationships out of convenience? Am I truly okay? Or am I just avoiding the pain? The answers weren't as simple as I wanted them to be. It wasn't as if everything suddenly fell into place. But over the course of the next few weeks, I started to see the gaps, the areas where I was still holding back. I realized that while I had been putting in the work to move on from the divorce, there were still parts of me that hadn't fully healed. I had been so focused on filling the void left by Lauren, so focused on making sure I was okay, that I hadn't really given myself the time to process the loss of what we once had. I had never fully allowed myself to grieve. I had been running away from the grief, thinking that if I just moved forward fast enough, I could avoid it. But grief doesn't work like that. You can't outrun it. You can't just skip over it and hope it goes away. It follows you, patiently waiting for the moment when you're ready to face it. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't truly faced the hurt I felt from losing Lauren. I hadn't truly processed the emotions tied to that betrayal. Sure, I had moved past the anger, and I had accepted that the relationship was over. But I hadn't given myself the space to truly mourn it, to feel the sadness, to feel the disappointment, the heartbreak, the sense of loss. I realized that in order to be truly happy, I had to embrace that sadness. I had to let myself grieve. I had to let go of the anger and the resentment, not for Lauren, but for myself. I needed to stop punishing myself for being hurt. I needed to forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for not standing up for my own needs sooner. I had to stop feeling like I had failed. It was an incredibly emotional moment for me. I remember sitting on the couch one evening, just staring at the wall, thinking about everything that had happened. The tears came, not in a wave, but in small, steady drops. And I let myself feel it. I didn't try to stop myself. I didn't tell myself that it was time to move on. I just let myself be in that moment, raw and vulnerable, and I allowed myself to mourn the loss of a relationship that, despite everything, had meant something to me. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a quick fix. But in that moment, I realized that the final step in my healing process was allowing myself to fully feel, to stop running away from the hurt and the pain, and to accept it as part of my story. And once I did that, it was like a weight had been lifted. I was finally ready to close that chapter completely. After that night, I felt different. Not perfect, but different. Lighter. More whole. I didn't feel like I was just surviving anymore. I was beginning to thrive. I didn't have all the answers about what the future held, but for the first time, I felt at peace with where I was. I was no longer afraid of the unknown. I was no longer holding on to the past. I was finally embracing the idea that my happiness was mine to create. I wasn't defined by Lauren's betrayal or by the failed marriage. I was defined by the choices I was making now, by how I was rebuilding myself. I was no longer filling a void. I was filling my life with purpose, with joy, with intention. And that, I realized, was the key to truly moving on. I don't know where I'll go next, but I'm looking forward to it. The future isn't something to fear anymore. It's something to embrace. Looking back, I don't think I ever could have predicted how this whole experience would shape me. I mean, when I first found out about Lauren's affair, I thought my life was over. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was just floating in the air trying to figure out where to land. But now, after everything, I've come to realize that it wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. One where I actually get to be in control of my own life again. The more time passes, the more I can see how much I've changed. It's not just the obvious stuff, the therapy, the working out, the new hobbies I've picked up. It's more about the internal shift that's happened. I'm different now, in a way that's hard to put into words. I feel like I finally understand what it means to be true to myself. To not only care about my own happiness, but to prioritize it. For so long, I was so caught up in trying to keep everyone else happy, in trying to meet everyone else's expectations, that I completely lost sight of my own needs. And that was a huge part of what allowed the marriage to fall apart. I wasn't looking out for myself, and because of that, I let Lauren's betrayal hit harder than it should have. But now I'm learning that it's not selfish to care about my own well-being. In fact, it's necessary. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're no good to anyone else either. I think I always kind of knew that, deep down, but I wasn't really practicing it. I was a people pleaser, always trying to make sure everyone around me was happy. I was terrified of confrontation, of rocking the boat, of upsetting anyone. That mindset had me trapped in a cycle of putting my own feelings and needs on the back burner. And it was exhausting. Since the divorce, though, I've been learning to speak up for myself, to set boundaries, and to trust that it's okay to put myself first. It's like discovering a new superpower. Being able to say no when something isn't right for me without feeling guilty about it. It's an empowering feeling. I used to think that putting myself first made me a bad person, but I've realized that it's the only way to truly take care of those I care about. You can't give what you don't have. If I'm not full, if I'm not content, then I'm no use to anyone else. It sounds so simple, right? But for me, it's been a huge lesson, and one that I'm still learning. Something else I've realized is how much I've been holding myself back. I was always waiting for permission to feel, to act, to move forward. I used to tell myself that I wasn't allowed to be happy until certain things were fixed. I told myself I couldn't start enjoying life until the past was dealt with, or until the pain was gone. But I've learned that healing isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about accepting that the pain will always be there, in some form, and learning how to live with it. To let it exist without letting it control me. I've also come to appreciate the importance of creating a life for myself. When I was with Lauren, my identity was so wrapped up in our relationship. I was part of a team, a unit, and I couldn't imagine who I would be without it. And when that team fell apart, I felt like I had lost myself. But now, I'm creating my own life again. It's not about replacing what was lost. It's about building something new, something that's mine and mine alone. And that's where the commitment comes in. I've made a promise to myself to never lose sight of who I am again, to never again let someone else dictate my happiness. I'm not going to allow myself to be in a relationship or in any situation where I feel like I'm not being true to myself. I deserve more than that. And so do you if you're reading this and feeling like you've been stuck in a similar place. There's this quote I've been thinking about lately. You can't pour from an empty cup. It's simple, but it's powerful. If I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm not filling my own cup first, then I have nothing to offer. I can't be a good friend, a good partner, a good person, unless I make sure I'm okay. I can't expect someone else to fill that void for me. I have to fill it myself. The road ahead is still uncertain. There are days when I wake up and feel a bit lost, like I'm still figuring things out. But there's also this feeling of excitement now, like I'm walking towards something better, something brighter. The future doesn't scare me anymore. I know that there are challenges ahead, but I'm ready for them. I've survived the worst of it. Now I'm just focused on moving forward, on becoming the person I want to be. I'm not sure what's next for me, but I'm open to it. I'm open to new experiences, new relationships when the time is right, and new opportunities. But most importantly, I'm open to growing, to changing, to evolving into the best version of myself. For so long, I thought my happiness depended on other people, on what they thought of me, on how they treated me. But now I know that true happiness comes from within. It's not about waiting for someone to complete you. It's about realizing that you're already whole. You don't need anyone else to make you feel worthy. You are enough, just as you are. And that's the biggest lesson I've learned in all of this. I am enough. I've always been enough. So, here I am, committed to myself, committed to my future, and ready to take on whatever life throws my way. The past is gone, and I'm not looking back. I'm focused on what's ahead. And I'm ready. Something I didn't expect to experience as I moved through this healing process was the idea of forgiveness. I always thought forgiveness was something that had to come from the other person, that it was something Lauren had to earn, something she had to prove, if she even deserved it. It felt almost like a luxury, something that was out of reach, especially when the hurt was still so fresh. I can't say that forgiveness was something I consciously pursued. I wasn't sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to forgive Lauren today. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to forgive her at all. I had so many unanswered questions, so much anger, and so many unresolved emotions about everything that had happened. She had lied, she had betrayed me, and she had completely shattered the trust we'd built over years of being together. The idea of forgiving her felt impossible, like giving her a free pass for all the pain she had caused. But after a lot of soul-searching, I came to realize something. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It wasn't about excusing what she did or making it okay. It was about freeing myself from the grip of the past. It was about letting go of the anger, the resentment, and the bitterness that had been weighing me down. Holding on to that stuff wasn't doing me any favors. It was just keeping me stuck, trapped in a cycle of pain and negativity. And if I didn't let go, I was never going to move on, never going to truly be free. Forgiving Lauren didn't mean I had to be okay with what she did, or that I was ready to be friends with her. It didn't even mean that I was going to forget the betrayal. But it did mean that I was choosing to release myself from the emotional chains that had kept me tethered to the past. I realized that as long as I was holding on to that anger, I was allowing her to have power over me. And I didn't want that anymore. The process of forgiveness wasn't linear. There were days when I would feel like I was doing well, and then something would happen. Maybe a random memory would pop up, or I'd hear something about her, and the anger would flare up again. I'd feel like I was right back where I started, and that frustrated me. It felt like I was moving forward, then taking 2 steps back. But that's the nature of healing, I guess. It's messy. It's unpredictable. But it's progress, even on the days that don't feel like progress. And as time went on, I started to realize that the pain I was feeling wasn't just about Lauren. It was about the story I had been telling myself. I had been telling myself that I was a victim, that I had been wronged, and that I would never be able to trust anyone again. I had been holding on to that narrative like it was a part of my identity. But the more I focused on my healing, the more I realized that this story didn't define me. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. The pain wasn't just about betrayal. It was about how I had let myself believe that my worth was tied to another person's actions. I had let someone else's choices determine how I saw myself. And that's when I understood. Forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of what Lauren had done. It was about letting go of the false story I had been holding on to. I wasn't broken. I wasn't worthless. I wasn't defined by what happened to me. Once I started to internalize that, once I started to see myself as whole again, the weight of the past started to lift. Forgiveness became less about Lauren and more about me reclaiming my own power. I was choosing to stop letting the past control me. I was choosing to move on. I'm not going to lie to you, though. Forgiveness is hard. It takes time. It takes effort. And there were days when I felt like I didn't want to forgive her, like I didn't owe her anything. But those were the moments that showed me that I wasn't forgiving her for her. I was forgiving for me. And as I sat there one evening, reflecting on everything, I realized that I had reached a place of peace. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her to take responsibility for everything. I didn't need her to do anything to make this right. I had already taken the first step by accepting the truth of the situation and choosing to heal. And that was enough. By forgiving, I was taking back my own life. I was freeing myself from the cycle of blame and resentment. I was choosing to focus on what I could control, my own happiness, my own healing, my own future. Of course, it's not like I've completely erased the past. There are still times when I think about the affair and feel that gut punch of betrayal. There are still moments when I feel the sting of how things ended. But I'm learning to sit with those feelings without letting them consume me. I'm learning to acknowledge the pain, but not let it dictate my future. And I'm learning that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward despite the hurt. It's been freeing, honestly. It's been like taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. I feel lighter, more in control. I feel like I've reclaimed something that I thought I lost forever. I think forgiveness is something that everyone has to do in their own time. Some people might never get there. Some people might hold on to the pain for years. But for me, it became clear that it was the only way to truly heal. And in doing so, I didn't just free myself from the past. I set myself up for a future where I can finally live without that weight hanging over me. So, to anyone reading this who's going through something similar, who's been hurt, who's been betrayed, know this. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about you. It's about taking back your power and finding peace. It's a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. But if you can get there, you'll be surprised at how much lighter and freer you feel. And that freedom? That's worth it. Okay, so I got to admit, dating again after a divorce, especially one that involved such a brutal betrayal, is terrifying. I think I always assumed that once I was over it, once I had figured my life out and was moving forward, I'd just hop back into the dating pool like it was no big deal. I was wrong. The idea of dating again felt completely foreign to me. For one, I had been with Lauren for so long that I kind of forgot what it was like to be single, to be on my own in that way. And secondly, after everything that had happened, I wasn't exactly sure how to trust anyone again, especially not someone I would potentially be romantically involved with. That's the kicker, right? It's not just about meeting new people or having fun conversations. It's about letting yourself be vulnerable again. And after everything that happened with Lauren, vulnerability was the last thing I wanted to experience. But eventually, after some encouragement from friends and some moments of frustration on my own part, I realized that I had to try. I had to get back out there, not because I needed a relationship to validate me, but because I needed to remind myself that I was worthy of love and connection. It wasn't about finding the perfect person. It was about allowing myself to take the next step in my healing journey. So, I gave online dating a shot. I know it sounds cliche, but honestly, it was the easiest way to dip my toes into the water without getting overwhelmed by the whole thing. I created a profile, got a few pictures together, thank you, gym selfies, and started swiping. I'm not gonna lie, the first few days were strange. I felt like a fish out of water, unsure of what to say or how to come across. I was used to talking to one person for years, and now I was supposed to have these casual conversations with strangers. It felt like a weird game, but then something unexpected happened. I actually enjoyed it, not in a superficial, oh, I just want attention kind of way, but in a way where I got to practice being myself again, where I could test out my own boundaries and figure out what I wanted from someone else. It felt good to put myself out there, to talk to people without the pressure of expectations or history. I wasn't looking for anything serious at first, just some lighthearted conversation, some small connections that reminded me that I was capable of connecting with others. It felt like a small but important step back into the world. But there were challenges too. The deeper I got into dating, the more I realized how much of me had been affected by Lauren's affair. It was like this invisible wall I had put up, something that kept me from fully opening up. I'd find myself questioning people, doubting their intentions, overthinking everything. If someone didn't text back within a few hours, I'd wonder if I had done something wrong, or if they were secretly talking to someone else. I had to remind myself constantly, this wasn't a reflection of me or my worth. But let's be real, it's hard not to project your past experiences onto new situations, especially when trust had been shattered. One of the toughest parts was dealing with the guilt. I'd be talking to someone, enjoying the conversation, and then out of nowhere, guilt would hit me. Am I moving on too fast? Is it wrong to want someone new in my life so soon? I'd feel like I was betraying my own feelings, like I wasn't allowed to move forward because Lauren's betrayal was still fresh in my mind. But then I'd remember, I'm not doing anything wrong. I wasn't rushing into something serious. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I was simply opening myself up to new experiences, taking the time to rediscover myself. The guilt wasn't coming from a place of truth. It was just my mind trying to keep me stuck in a past I couldn't change. Through all of this, I realized something important. Dating after betrayal is a process. It's not about jumping into a relationship right away or forcing yourself to feel something you're not ready for. It's about reclaiming your ability to trust again, your ability to love, your ability to experience joy without the fear of being hurt again. It's about taking baby steps, testing the waters, setting boundaries, and learning how to build a connection without expecting perfection. And I started seeing that I was growing in ways I hadn't expected. I wasn't as afraid of rejection as I once was. I wasn't looking for validation or reassurance that I was lovable. I already knew that about myself. I wasn't looking for someone to fill a void anymore. I had done that work already. The person I was dating didn't need to fix me. They just needed to be someone who appreciated me for who I was, someone who made me feel comfortable, happy, and valued. Still, there were moments where I'd feel anxious or insecure, where I'd find myself questioning if I was doing this whole dating again thing right. But instead of pushing those feelings away, I tried to lean into them. I tried to let them be part of the process, part of the growth. And little by little, I started to feel more comfortable with the idea of being in a relationship again. Not because I was desperate, but because I was ready to open my heart to someone new. When the time was right, of course. There was no rush. As I went on more dates and met new people, I began to feel a sense of peace about it all. It wasn't about finding the one right away. It was about learning to trust myself again, learning to set boundaries, and ultimately discovering that I was enough as I was whether or not I had someone by my side. I didn't need someone to complete me. I had already done the work to be whole on my own. Now I was just looking for someone who could complement that, someone who could add to the joy I had already started cultivating in my own life. So, that's where I'm at right now. I'm not rushing things, but I'm also not afraid of what comes next. Dating again has been its own journey, with ups and downs, but it's helped me realize how far I've come. It's reminded me that I'm still worthy of love, of connection, of fun. And that's something I didn't always believe after everything that happened with Lauren. But now I know I'm capable of opening my heart again, and that's a big deal. It's strange to think that, just a little over a year ago, I was on the floor, shattered by the news of Lauren's affair. I was lost, angry, and broken. I could barely picture a future without her. I had no idea who I was without the life we had built together. But here I am now, writing this, feeling something I never thought I'd experience again. Peace. I remember the day I walked out of our house for the last time, after everything had been finalized. It felt like I was leaving behind a whole life, like I was walking into the unknown with nothing but my own heart and the lessons I'd learned. I was scared, but I was also relieved. And now, with some time and distance, I can see how much of that fear was unfounded. I had this sense that my life had ended with my marriage, that somehow I'd be forever defined by the pain of betrayal. But I've come to realize that my story is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning. The journey wasn't easy. The healing didn't happen overnight. There were days when I felt like I'd never get over the sting of the past, when I questioned everything about myself, my choices, my worth, my future. But now I look at the person I've become and feel proud. I'm not perfect and I don't have it all figured out, but I've learned how to be kind to myself. I've learned that it's okay to feel hurt, but that pain doesn't have to define me. What's been most surprising, though, is the way I've found joy again. It wasn't something I could rush. It wasn't about pretending everything was fine or forcing myself to move on faster than I was ready to. It was about sitting with the discomfort, acknowledging it, and then slowly, bit by bit, carving out space for new experiences, new growth, and yes, new happiness. I've started doing things I never imagined I'd do after the divorce. I travel more, something I always said I'd do with Lauren, but somehow never did. I picked up new hobbies. I met new people. Hell, I even started running, something I thought was totally out of my league. But through it all, I kept discovering pieces of myself that had been buried under the weight of the marriage and the betrayal. I'd forgotten who I was for so long, but now I'm remembering, and it's liberating. Then there's the fact that I'm dating again. It's funny to think about it now, because I remember how scared I was to even entertain the idea of being with someone else. I thought I'd be forever damaged, that no one would want me. But the truth is I've grown. I've become someone who doesn't need validation from others to feel whole. I'm not trying to fill a void anymore. I'm just looking to connect with people who appreciate me for who I am. And I'm no longer afraid of vulnerability. But here's the real kicker. I don't need someone else to be happy. I'm okay on my own. More than okay. Actually, I've learned that the most important relationship I can have is the one with myself. That was a tough pill to swallow at first, especially when I felt like I had to prove something to the world, like I needed someone to validate my worth. But as the days passed, I realized that I am enough, just as I am. It's kind of wild to think about how far I've come. There was a time when I thought the betrayal would break me. I thought that I'd never trust anyone again, never love again, never feel whole again. But here I am, living a life that's not defined by pain or bitterness. And that's a gift I never could have imagined when everything first fell apart. As I look ahead, I still don't know exactly where the road is going to take me. Maybe I'll meet someone I can build a life with. Maybe I won't. I've come to realize that the future doesn't need to be planned out perfectly. I just need to trust that I'll be okay, no matter what happens. I've got this newfound confidence in myself, in my ability to navigate whatever comes my way, and that feels like freedom. What I've learned in all of this, more than anything, is that life is unpredictable, and sometimes the things that break us open are the things that make us stronger. I've found resilience in places I didn't know existed, and I've discovered a version of myself that I'm proud of. I'm not the man I was when Lauren cheated on me, but in some ways, I'm glad for that. I'm someone different now, someone better. To anyone reading this who's been betrayed or hurt, I want you to know, it gets better. It might not feel like it right now, and that's okay. It might feel like the pain will never end, like you'll never trust again, like you'll never be the same. But you will heal. In time, you will. You'll find joy again. You'll find peace. You'll find yourself again. It won't happen all at once. It's a slow, sometimes painful process, but you are stronger than you know. And one day, you'll look back, just like I am now, and realize that the person you are becoming is someone you never could have imagined before, but someone you'll be proud of. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know one thing for certain. I'm ready for it. And that, I think, is the greatest gift of all.